All right. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to be speaking with the author, Kirsten. It's Kirsten?
It is Kirsten.
There we go. Kirsten Miller, who wrote the very exciting book we all read this month. I loved it. Lulu Dean's Little Library of Banned Books. Very long title that I always messed
Mm.
up when I was talking to about it this month. Um, So, just a very short bio now. Kirsten Miller grew up in the mountains of North Carolina and now lives in Brooklyn with her kid and her cat. After Barnard, she landed in advertising instead of publishing and started writing on the side to amuse herself. That side project became Kiki Strike, the first of more than 15 books, about half of them co-authored with Jason Segel. Her adult novel,
Siegel.
Siegel.
Yeah.
Her adult novels include The Change, a feel-good feminist revenge fantasy about menopause, Lulu Dean's Little Library of Banned Books, a sharp and funny takedown of Book Esther. Book ba Yeah, you can't let her come out here, please. Sorry.
No, I have one of those too, so
A sharp and funny takedown of book banning set in a small southern town, and The Woman of Wild Hill, her witches novel, it's already out, October 2025. Um, so thank you again for joining us. Thank you for everybody who's here this evening. And I'm going to just let you fill in any blanks that I totally missed there because there's a lot more to you than that few sentences.
well, I fight crime after dark. Um, let's see. That covers a lot of it. But yeah, I mean it's Lula is it's funny because Lula was published about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I think almost exactly 2 years ago. And am still going around talking to people about this book, which is really unusual. And I think it's because, I mean, I know it's because this is a subject that's very near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, including mine. And, it's something that a lot of communities are going through right now. It's a pretty traumatizing thing when it happens. And I have found a lot of people want to talk about it. And if anybody has any questions about book banning, I can tell you, I can answer a lot of questions, not all of them, because it's different in every state. But, it's definitely something that's happening everywhere in this country. There is no place that is immune to it. But, the good news is it's the people who are behind it. It's a small minority of people who are just very loud and very active and very willing to force their agenda on other people. But the vast majority of Americans are not in favor of book banning. So, it's a fight we can win.
I have a question. From the time that you wrote the book to now, has there been any like big happenings in the world of book banning? Because like you said, it was published 2 years ago, but you probably even wrote it even earlier than that.
Yeah, well, I wrote it really quickly. So I actually wrote it in 2023. It was like, I don't know, it was just it was came out of a suggestion from my editor and I just couldn't stop thinking about it and I couldn't stop writing it. And so I ended up writing it faster than I've ever written anything before. So it wasn't that long ago that it got written. And I think that there was a real pinnacle right in around 2024, as the book was coming out, where this was Moms for Liberty, which is a huge, or was a, I don't know about huge, it was a big organization that was really pushing book banning across the United States, was kind of feeling its power. And there were a lot of issues in states like Texas that got a lot of attention. And, those things are, I wouldn't say anything's been solved. I would say that, Mobs for Liberty got a real drumming in the last election when they had a lot of candidates up who lost. So I feel like the wind is in our sails right now as opposed to theirs. But yeah, I mean, there's stuff happening all the time. There was, I guess, the most shocking thing at one point was, or one of the most shocking things was, well, first of all, there were states in which librarians were being threatened with jail
Hmm.
for leaving certain books on the shelves. There were libraries in Idaho, I believe it was, that closed their doors to everybody under the age of 18 because they could not guarantee that, somebody under the age of 18 might, stumble across a book that was on one of the lists. So, I mean, there was all sorts of absolutely crazy stuff going on. In fact, if you want a really good picture of what it was like, there's an excellent documentary, I believe it's still up on pbs.org, called The Librarians, and
Okay.
it follows a bunch of librarians across the country, a few in Texas, one in New Jersey. I can't remember where, the other people were from, but it was a pretty good, cross section in the United States. And it was even for me, like, I've been listening to people talk about this for 2 years. It was still pretty shocking.
Uh,
So go and watch it. It's also a really, really good film. So you'll learn something and you'll enjoy it as well.
and that's called The Librarians.
The Librarians, yeah.
Um, we have probably equal Americans as Canadians on here. And actually, when we were reading this book, one of our smallest chapters in a really small town in Northern Ontario sent me an email saying that they have another book club in town and they had read this book, and I guess one of the women has to do a report when they read a specific book, and they had read this book. And
Mm.
so she had sent me the report, and I was like shocked because in 2023 the Peel District School Board attempted to remove all books published prior to 2008 from school libraries. And for those
Wow.
Canadians on the line, like the Peel Library or the Peel District is part of Toronto, so it's huge.
Yeah,
So, but like you hear that and you're like, how could that even be possible?
I know. Well, look, I mean, this what happened was, I can't speak for Canada, but I can speak for the United States, which is, I think a lot of us assumed that this was something of the past,
Yeah,
that this was something from the 1940s, that this was a battle that we had won, that we were not going to have to fight again. And I think that if there's anything that we have learned over the past few years, it's that we can never take these, we can never rest on our laurels, that if we want to keep our freedoms, we're going to have to fight for them every single day.
yeah,
And, so what happened was, and I speak for myself, not necessarily for any of you, but, I took my eye off the ball, and I thought this was not a problem that was going to come back, that, we could all rest assured that, the books would remain on library shelves. And while I was looking in another direction, and a lot of other people as well, this tiny minority of people found their way onto school boards, onto town councils, into county commissioner roles, into all of these like very, very local political positions that choose what books are put in libraries. And they, it's an example of how a very small group of people, relatively speaking, managed to get one over on the rest of us. And it took us a while to figure out that the problem was even there, and then to start fighting back. But I think people know now, and the tide has started to turn.
and I mean, not to downplay obviously book banning, but I mean, there's a lot of other liberties that are like taking on a similar sort of nuance in the world. So you're right, like when you're looking one way, what's happening the other way?
Yeah, no, it's sort of, I think it's, as someone of Generation X, I just thought that there were a lot of battles that were behind us in terms of women's freedoms, in terms of, voting rights, in terms of, being able to read whatever you want, all of this sort of stuff. And it's shocking that we're having to have these fights again in 2026. But that's I think that's the lesson we have to learn, is you just can't stop. You can't take your eyes off the ball.
Yeah. So Lulu Dean's Little Library starts as one woman's attempt to control what her town reads and ends up doing the opposite. Where did that idea, that initial seed of the idea come from? You mentioned your editor.
Well, she said she was down in Texas, I think, at the beginning of 2023, and Texas has had a lot of issues with book banning, as has everywhere in the United States. But the people of Austin were fighting back, and so a lot of them had put these signs out in their front yard that said, "Come and get it," meaning we have all the banned books, and if you'd like to borrow them, you can come borrow them from us. And she found that very inspirational because it is. And so she wrote me a note or called me, can't remember which, but she said, "What do you think about a little library filled with banned books?" And I was in the middle of writing something else and I really wanted to finish it, but I couldn't stop thinking about that idea and thinking about what books I would put into my little library and who I would want to find them and what I would hope they would take away from the experience. And so it was just like this really wonderful matchmaking process. And I eventually ended up putting my other project aside and writing this in a like 3 or 4 months. And yeah, so that was, but the idea for Lula, the idea of switching the covers was just sort of, I don't know, that was, I think that that was how I ended up making the library interesting to me was, this idea that people were finding them randomly and by surprise and just sort of, showing in a very fanciful way, the impact that a book can have on a person.
I have a little library, so
Do you?
yeah, it spoke to me immediately.
I love little libraries. I mean, it's just, I think what little libraries are in a lot of ways are kind of a throwback to the world before algorithms, where you could actually find something and it's just serendipity.
Yeah,
And you open a little library and there's a book and you can take it out and it's not something that's been recommended to you by the algorithm or not something that we think you'll like, but it's just something that you might never have picked up otherwise.
right.
And so I think they're doing a really important service for the universe.
So the way the book's written is each chapter is a new character and the book sort of that they pick up. Did you have to like lay out that entire thing before you wrote the book, or was it?
No, it's so the matchmaking process of putting people together with books. Like I knew sometimes it was I had the book came to me for there was a book I wanted to write about, and then I was like, who do I want to find this? Sometimes there was kind of a character that I wanted to showcase, and I thought, what kind of book would they need to find? And so it really began with that matchmaking process. And then I realized at some point, I was getting so excited writing this. I was like, I need something to hold all of this together. So that's where I came up with the sort of war between the two women about, which is really over the future of a small town in the South. And which way do you want to go forward? Do you want to go for, sorry, which way do you want to go forward or backward? And so that became kind of the through line. But it was really I don't remember it because I am one of those people. I write lots of outlines and I spend a lot of time with, index cards on the wall and things like that. But with this one, it really came naturally. It was just there was so much that I wanted to talk about, and this was such a great vehicle for doing that. So I don't know. It was just fun.
So initially when I started reading it, the first chapter, I was like, okay, because you get into it pretty quickly. And then the second chapter changed to a new character, and then the third chapter, and then I was like, hold on, where are my characters? But once you accept that this
Oh
is how it
yeah.
is written,
Well,
then
this is like it is, and it's sort of like so I wanted to recreate the feeling of being in a small town. Because it is like a very, it's there's a bit of claustrophobia involved. Like there's a feeling of sort of people who are always watching you and kind of on top of you and looking at what you're doing and you see all of these characters and while you're looking at one, another one might walk by in the background. I just wanted to create that atmosphere. But yeah, I probably should have, had a little sort of like, you know, just go with it. It's kind of like a Coen Brothers movie. Like if you fight it,
yeah,
you're not going to like it.
that's
But
true.
if you decide to just go with it, you might end up having a laugh.
Rita's asking in the chat here, which character's secret reading journey was your favorite to write?
Um, I mean, I really loved all of them. I mean, I think one of the books that I knew I wanted to write about immediately, like when the first moment that the idea was proposed was I knew I wanted to write about Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Yeah.
And because I think it's such an important book. It is, it's a very lighthearted book in a lot of ways, but it's a really important one. And I think I've always been a huge advocate of boys reading the
Mhm.
book as well, because I think there's too much. I think that, the female body should not be a mystery, since we are half of the population. Like maybe it should just be a normal thing. Um, so I really wanted that book to fall into the hands of a young kid who's just kind of trying to figure out how everything works. And he's not shocked and he's not horrified and he certainly isn't, traumatized in any way. He actually learns a few things about what the other 50% of the population is like. And so that was a lot of fun. But I can't think of one I didn't enjoy. I really loved writing all of them. Because it was an opportunity to talk often about books I really liked and to make fun of ones I don't. So,
Yeah, yeah. There was the other side of it, right? The one that they were supposed to be reading.
yes, yes. And it's a lot of those I made up because I didn't want to denigrate other people's books. I
Fair
really
enough.
don't, unless it's like, there were a couple of people that I did that too, but I felt like they deserved it. But like I didn't want to like uh sort of name a gay romance book and say it was like the most boring gay romance of all time. That wouldn't have been fair to anyone. So I had to make that one up as well.
So the book takes on like sort of book banning, but with like a lot of humor and warmth, not just outrage. And was that tone something that you landed on early, or did it take some
Yeah.
like finding?
Well, it was also so the book is very much in the spirit of like the Southern storytelling tradition, which is always a bit over the top and filled with, sort of eccentric characters and, tall tales. So I knew I wanted to kind of have that feeling to it. But yeah, I also wanted to, I feel like as a country, we have been lectured a lot, and browbeaten, and, it's been a difficult time for us over the past, bit. And I felt like I wanted to talk about very serious issues, but I wanted to do it in a way that wouldn't send people running and screaming in the opposite direction. So I thought, a spoonful of medicine, I mean, of honey sugar would help the medicine go down. And so I really wanted to make it feel fun and funny and entertaining so that people felt like they were pulled in and they were welcome, um, into this discussion rather than making them feel like they were going to be sitting in a classroom and sort of learning. Because, I don't, if anybody's going to be held up as being wise and, mighty, it probably shouldn't be me. So
Well, Rihanna thinks you nailed it, and I would
thanks,
couldn't agree
Rihanna. I
more.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I was definitely not bored or think like I didn't have a feeling I was at school. Did you go back and read any of the actual banned books your characters encountered while you were writing?
I read some that I hadn't read before. So I looked at some of the books that were on the top of the banned books lists and I read them for myself. Um, so that was new, but I didn't need to go back and read Beloved or Mouse or any of these others. I really read Beloved 5 times in college, so I think I got that one down pat. Um, but I I did the books that I chose kind of as the special books are books that I really love. So they're often books that I've read more than once or twice. But when it comes to book bans, it's really important. There are a lot of books out there. I find it really it's hard for me to it's hard for anyone, I think, to really argue about book banning from the sort of, every book needs to be special and saved and everything perspective, because some books are just, I don't like them. There are lots of books I don't like. There are lots of books that I don't necessarily feel are the most wonderful, pieces of literature ever. But, the fact is like when you have all the books on the shelf, it's your decision what you read. And the minute they start getting taken off, that's you giving that decision to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think if you ask people, even people who might think that there are certain books that that should be taken off, the question is, who do you want to choose those books for you?
Yeah.
And nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to give that decision over to anyone else because they believe it should be theirs. And you're like, yes, exactly. If you want that decision to be yours and yours alone, then you keep the books on the shelf and you read what you like. And you don't let anybody else tell you what you should or shouldn't be reading. So,
Uh, Rita has a question here. She wants to know what you think is the fundamental wound that drives Lulu's need for such rigid control.
oh, Lulu is like a lot of people in the like it's I'm from the South, so I wouldn't say it's not everybody, but it's a fair number of people who feel like, they have been denied a life and a lifestyle that you know that they deserve for some reason, like, that this is they deserve to have sort of a big name and a fancy house and and have their family name be sort of revered in the area. And she at one point, her family was well known and revered in the area for all sorts of wrong reasons, and they met their just desserts, and now she's angry about that. And so I think that that's the fundamental wound, is she thinks she should be more important than she is. And that's the way she's sort of like throughout her entire life, she's desperate for this attention, and she's desperate for this affirmation, and she's desperate for other people to see her as important. And it's as I think as Beverly Underwood says at one point, this is somebody who was not born without, she's especially in her youth, she's not unattractive. She has all sorts of good qualities, but she just completely destroys them by sort of approaching life in this way. So I think that's her fundamental wound. But she gets it in it's, I also think that that she has been kind of the victim of some unfair gossip surrounding the untimely death of her husband, which a lot of people seem to think that she was responsible for. And so she's kind of suffered at that gossip mill as well.
The town, let's talk about the town for a second here. The town in the book feels very specific and lived in. Is it drawn from a real place, or did you like stitch it together from a whole bunch of places?
I think it's less. So I'm from a small town in the South, and there is a Confederate statue standing in front of what used to be the courthouse. So, and my best friend did spend years and years and years trying to get that thing torn down, and never, she died before. That's one of the reasons the book is dedicated to her, I think, is because, or the afterword, I mentioned her in the afterword, because, I wanted to do what I could to help further that cause, now that she's no longer with us. So there are a lot of things that I borrowed from my hometown, but it's not my hometown. What I wanted to do was I wanted to have the characters are all people that I feel very like, I feel like I know them, even if they're not based on specific people. They're people that I feel like I've encountered at some point. And so the town is really that collection of people more than anything else. Um, but yeah, it was I loved I really had a lot of fun creating that atmosphere. And the other thing I wanted to do was really show that I think a lot of people seem to think that small southern towns are only populated by people like Lula. And the truth is they've got everyone,
Mhm.
and that's something that I wanted to make sure people saw.
On that note, I did get an email with a question for you, and they said
Mm.
that one thing that came out of their book club is that a lot of the members were sitting around saying that they wish they knew their neighbors better, and I wondered if that had been an intention, just because like that small town feeling that you have, like I do feel like we're kind of losing it in that we don't know who our neighbors are, we don't talk to each other anymore, we're all on our devices, so. I wondered if, and I feel like the little libraries are helping to helping to strengthen that sort of community base. And I wondered if that had ever crossed your mind when you were writing it.
I mean, I love the little library things, and I totally agree that they are a means of strengthening community and having people sort of visit your yard and,
Yeah.
have a book in common to talk about. And I love book clubs. I think book clubs are incredibly important right now. And I love seeing more and more and more of them pop up because they are such an essential thing in this age when, so many of us spend, most of our time on a screen, and having sitting in a room with other people or either even like, talking to them via Zoom, it's such an important thing that we don't do as often as we used to. And talking to, the fact that we don't talk to each other is one of the reasons we're in the mess we're in right now.
Yeah.
I think if Americans actually went out and talked to each other more often, we'd probably realize we have a lot more in common than we think.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I can't speak for, I live in Brooklyn. Like I know like three of my neighbors.
Exactly.
Um, but like when I was growing up, like, it was also my mother had a real estate office. So she knew everybody.
Everybody, yeah.
Like the woman knew everybody in town. So I feel like I got to meet a lot of people that I probably wouldn't have met otherwise just because my mother was extremely chatty.
Do you have any like I grew up in a small town. I'm same as you. I live in a big city now. We do know some of our neighbors, but not like my parents do. They grew up in a small town and my dad sold computers, so he knew everybody in town. And
Yeah, I mean,
I fundamentally miss that. I loved that we could walk into a store and know everybody.
it's great on one hand. It's not so great when your mother goes to the grocery store and she runs into people who tell her what kind of bad things you've been up to as a
Yeah, fair,
teenager. So
fair.
I got in trouble on several occasions because my mother ran into Mrs. So and so in the A&P.
All right. So there's a real generosity I found that like in how you treat even sort of the most misguided characters, of which there were a couple. How do you write people you disagree with, but without flattening them?
Um, I think that, it was something that I really tried hard to do. I truly believe that there aren't very many truly evil people in the world. I think there's some, like people like Nathan Dugan, and there are Nathan Dugans out there, but Dugan didn't get his own chapter. Um, I think most people are just, you know, uh, human. You know what I mean? And they have. They can, Lula, for example, like I would not want to spend any time with Lula. If I saw Lula coming down the street toward me, I would cross the street to get away from her. But I still recognize her as a human being. So I look for kind of those places where our lives intersect in a weird way. Like I don't, I may not share Lula's love of, book banning, and I certainly don't, am not a huge attention hog like she is. I'm deeply introverted. But she loves her kids, and I have a child that I love, so I look for kind of the places where we share something in common and try to use that as a basis for highlighting somebody's humanity. It's just become so easy for us to write other people off as something less than human or monstrous or that. And it's, in my experience, there are very few people who are truly bad. They're out there, but most people are just kind of, you know, uh, ignorant or, you know, sorry, I'm looking at somebody.
Sorry, my daughter is asking me where her rain pants are because it's pouring rain.
Uh, sorry, I was looking at that. Sorry, the chat came up and I missed it.
Yeah, I think you've answered. Oh no, Rita just asked, was there a real world banned book that didn't make the final cut that you wish had?
Hmm. I mean, there's so many. I mean, every good book has been banned at this point. You know, I think what I really wanted to make sure that, so going back to the who's evil and who's not, like I think most book banners are like Lulu. Okay, they're busybodies. They're people who see an opportunity to get attention or to like maybe mess with people a little bit. They're busybodies and gadflies. But there's a small, and they're the ones who go online and they get the lists of books offline. Sorry, online of, this list of novels or whatever that they've never read. Maybe there's a passage that they look at or a sentence that they read, and then they go and start pulling books off the shelves. There's a smaller group who actually makes those lists. And they're the really dangerous ones. Because if you look at the lists of books that are banned, it's funny because everybody's talking about the children and not like, sort of exposing them to racy literature. Very few, they never go to the romance sections,
Yeah.
they almost never go to the horror sections. But what they're banning are things, about the Holocaust and Black history and anything with an LGBTQ character in it. And, and these are, so those are the books I wanted to make sure I had a representative of each of those types of books
Hmm.
in the novel so that people could really see that it's not just about, pulling, I mean, there are a lot of, erotic books out there that, people seem to think are the ones that are being pulled off the shelves, and those they're not. It's a whole different group of things, and it's when you look at it, you get a sense of just how sinister it can be.
Sometimes when I'm looking for a classic, I actually look up banned books and I choose one of them.
Well, it's not a bad way of doing it because those are any book that makes those lists, that list is going to be one that's incredibly powerful
Yeah, for
for
sure.
whatever reason. It is a book that has had like a real impact on the world around it. And so yeah, I think it's not necessarily a terrible way of choosing your books.
I really liked the daughters, and I thought that that was because I'm like, well, how is this gonna like? How are we gonna get rid of this woman? So I thought that they were very insightful. How did you come up with that? Was that always the plan?
Well, I think that the younger generations are, you know, they are sort of I perhaps a little bit more, well, it's hard to say at this point, but it's when I was writing it, I was sort of seeing them as more kind of open-minded and accepting of a lot of things. It's just sort of a lot of the things that I mean previous generations still um are troubled by, I think, are not huge issues for people who are younger. A lot of, and it's just sort of it's things that are very, very obvious to them or not so obvious to us.
Right.
But I also wanted to, it's a very hopeful book, and I wanted it to be very hopeful because I think we need to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we need to have something that we're working toward. And people will have, criticized the book for being a little too Pollyanna-ish, and it's in the way that it ends. But it's like it's my book, and that's the way I want. That's how I want things to turn out. So if you can't see what you want, you can't write what you want. How do you expect to get it? So this book is my little spell that I'm sort of casting on the world to try and make sure that this is, that something like this can actually come to be.
I like that. And also the family relations I thought was really interesting as well. Like just bringing everybody in town together and then having the big reunion. I liked all of that.
Well, oh my God, I mean, there is nothing at all fanciful about that.
Yeah.
That is like, I mean, that is a reality that this country is going to be coming to terms with as more and more people sort of look into their family histories,
Yeah.
especially using DNA technology. And, so that is, I think, something that a lot of people are going to end up trying to figure out, like, how do we want to go forward with this? I think it's going to change the way that we look at American history too, and the way that we look at a lot of the people, like who do we want to hold up as our heroes?
Yeah.
So I look forward to that. I think it's absolutely, I look forward to the day when, a lot of the organizations that have been very, that have excluded certain kinds of people are, forced to open their doors
Of course.
because suddenly, there are a lot more sons of the revolution than there were before.
Absolutely. Um, okay. Rita's got a question here. If you were to start your own little free library today, which three books, not banned books, would you put in it as books everyone should read?
Oh my God,
Put you on the
that's
spot.
hard. Hmm. I mean, I could tell you my favorite books.
Yeah.
I mean, I really my all-time favorite book is Rebecca. I love it. It's like Daphne du Maurier. It's fantastic. I love it. It's probably been banned somewhere. It should be banned somewhere. Also, I'm looking up because I have all of these. My bookshelf is here. I really love. I don't know. I'm kind of. This is the bookshelf with all of my witchy books on it. So,
You have
uh,
specific bookshelves for specific types of books,
yeah. Um,
as you
I
should.
do. I do actually. Well, this is like because the change in the Women of Wild Hill are
Yeah.
very witchy. So, I have to have all of my witchy books up here. I don't know. I mean, I could write out you'd have to give me some time to think about it. I mean, there's so many books that I love. Like I absolutely love Circe by Madeline Miller.
We read that in book club, actually.
I think it's a perfect book. I love all of Angela Carter's books. If you haven't read her or heard of her, you should look her up because she's great. In fact, it's sort of she's really great at I think what I would call like seriously dark and gothic almost like fairy tales or but they're very focused on women. They're great. And let's see, I'll come up with a third. Um, I don't know, The Hidden Life of Trees. I read about witches, plants, mushrooms. That's my sort of stuff.
Um, can you tell us, you've published another book
Mhm.
since Lulu's, and can you tell us what it's about for anybody who fell in love with your writing and wants to read more?
So all of my books it's funny because people are like, you wrote a book about, menopausal witches, and then you wrote a book about book banning, and then this one is about basically, taking on the oligarchy. Like what's the common denominator? And it really is, I have this feeling, I have this deep-seated conviction that women have to save the world.
Hmm.
So every single one of my books is meant to sort of give us all the kick in the butt that we need to go out there and find our power and use it. And, so with The Change, which was my first book for adults, it was all about, um, three women who reach a certain age and discover that they have powers, but what they decide to do with those powers is to address kind of the violence that we see in the world against young women
Hmm.
and working to make the world a safer place for our daughters and nieces and goddaughters and whatnot. And we can do it. We have the power. we're the most powerful generation of women in the history of the world. We can actually make these changes if we put our minds to it. And, Lula Dean is obviously about kind of waking up and doing the things you know in your heart you need to do. And the Women of Wild Hill is yeah, it's kind of on a broader scale, but it really is literally witches versus the patriarchy. They're taking down some oligarchs. But it's a lot of fun. Like, I in all of the books, I touch on a lot of big and often very scary social issues, but I try to do it in a way that's entertaining and funny and makes people feel like they're kind of a part of the discussion.
Are you writing anything right now that you can tell us about?
Yes, I'm writing about a book about a woman who takes on her HOA, which, which is like I've discovered the one thing every American can agree on is how much they hate their HOA. So, yes, that's
And
what it's about.
when will that come out?
Probably next spring around this time.
Okay, so we have to wait a little while.
Yeah. But it'll
I
be fun.
I just was visiting Goodreads to post the link to the Women of Wild Hill, and I was just wondering if you I like to ask authors often if they ever read their reviews.
I have at points in the past, and I do, I take them seriously, and I think that there's a lot of good constructive criticism there. But writing is so hard, and just keeping you have to kind of trick yourself all the time into believing that you can do it.
Fair enough.
And it's you can find a review that'll, you know, absolutely rip you apart.
Yeah.
And if you're in the middle of writing something, that's not the thing that's going to get you up in the morning in front of the computer slaving away on the next book. So I do read them, but I not often, I'll put it that way.
Well, you're in a league of your own here because your three adult books have all got over four points on Goodreads, which is almost impossible.
Well, I think I found my like I am really really happy with the audience that I've found.
Yeah.
Like I kind of suspected there were other women like me out there that shared a lot of my concerns and I found them and I love talking to them. It's one of my favorite things to do is to get on a Zoom with like people in a part of the country that I would never have the chance to visit and just have a good talk about all of this stuff, about women and witches and book banning and all of this, it's like it's fantastic. It makes me really, really happy to know that all of you are out there. Because, so I think we feel very alone, a lot of us, a lot of the time, but we're not. I can guarantee it.
Kirsten, as the last question, authors often are reading arcs of other people's books or books that have not yet come out. Is there anything you recommend that you've read recently by another author or any book you've read recently that you would recommend we pick up? It's you guys are just a good inside scoop.
Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot of books that I enjoyed. I just did an event with a woman named Alyssa something Russian Gilmore. I'm sorry, I should remember her name, middle part of her name, but she wrote a book called The Fortune Tellers of the Roo,
Oh, okay.
which is great. I really really loved her first book as well, which is called The Witch and the Czar, which was about a witch and Ivan the Terrible. And it was really, really, really wonderful and incredibly well researched. So there we go. Selnikova. There, I knew it all along. But I just also got a book in the mail by an author that I really like, whose name is Ali Dreyer.
Okay.
And it's called Night Song. But she's written, and I haven't read this one yet, but she's written books that sort of focus on Appalachian witchcraft. And as somebody who's from Appalachia, I really appreciate that. And I really loved her first book. So, yeah, look for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time this evening, and thank you for writing such a important book, really. We had everybody reviewing it on, we have a host page, and everybody was saying that the ratings were really high, and people, it really was. Sometimes we read books that aren't catalysts for discussion, and this one was not one of those. So thank you so much for
Yeah, no,
finding something that was
oh
easy
yeah,
to
there's always
discuss.
something to talk about with this
Yeah,
one.
yeah, for sure.
Well,
And
good.
we look forward to what's next for sure.
Thank you so much. Yeah, come look me up and we'll all fight our HOAs next year. All
All right, sounds good. Thank you,
right.
everybody, for
Thank
joining
you.
us tonight, and have a great night.
Bye. Bye.